Hey everyone, Shikari Dill here. I wanted to make a brief video talking about the incredibly unique Elemental Destruction Legendary RE. This has been one of the more unique builds that I've played around with on Ascension due to the fact that it's a caster build that uses a combo point system. If you enjoy these build discussion videos, then feel free to hit that like and sub button, and let's jump right in. So what is Elemental Destruction? What this enchant does is it tries to fuse a little bit of Ele Shaman into a Destruction Warlock package with a unique twist. Your Lightning Bolt is transformed into an ability called Energy Bolt, dealing Firestorm damage and generating combo points. Now Energy Bolt itself is a very unique ability as it's a casted ability that costs energy to use and generates a combo point. After doing some testing with the ability, it is indeed flagged as a fire ability, which is important for applying Ignite to our target, which is a pretty hefty chunk of our damage. Your Immolate is also now transformed into an ability called Elemental Immolation. This is going to be your big combo point spender. Do note that this form of immolation can also be consumed by Conflagrate. Your Flame Shock and Elemental Immolation periodic damage ticks will increase your active Immolate's damage by 20%, stacking up to 10 times. This means you're basically just going to want to keep Flame Shock up on your target at all times. For my legendary abilities, I took Blink and Unending Resolve. I also took Metamorphosis at one point, but I found out that even though Energy Bolt was considered a fire ability, it still took me out of meta form, which was really lame. So the lesson learned was don't pick meta for this build, try something else. For my epic abilities, I took Power Infusion for the spellcasting buff, and even though the spellcasting buff was nice, I still thought this build was a little bit too slow, and I'll explain that later. And then I took Dragon's Breath for the AoE damage component, and the CC is really nice, and I will explain how that setup will work as well in the talent section. I also took Chaos Bolt and Hand of Gul'dan as they're both considered fire abilities, and they're just nice extra DPS abilities to use on cooldown. So for talents, you're going to want to run with a lot of Fire Mage talents naturally because all of our abilities deal some form of fire damage. As mentioned earlier, the biggest way you can get a boost in your DPS is by taking the Ignite talent, which is why Spell Crit is such a huge stat for this build because you're going to want to try to get as many crits on your fire abilities as possible. Now if you combine that with the talent Firestarter, your Dragon's Breath will make your next Flame Strike instant cast, cost no mana, and deal 30% more damage. This is really massive damage in AoE situations and can put Ignite on all of the mobs in the pack. Not to mention you can follow up with Rain of Fire or Hellfire and just get some really big AoE DPS going. Another notable talent to pick up is Lightning Overload, as this will give our Energy Bolt a chance to generate an additional combo point. And then the rest of the talents are really going to be thrown into the Destruction Warlock tree so we can buff up that Immolate as much as possible. For epic enchants, Consuming Flames is absolutely mandatory as this will increase the damage of our Ignite by quite a bit. Boomer could also be a pretty decent option if you want to throw in a little bit more AoE damage. And as mentioned, since Spell Crit is so big for this build, I would recommend taking Demonic Mind and pairing it with the Demon Armor ability, as this will give us a nice boost to crit. So that's generally how I set up this build, but let's get down to the brass tacks and talk about whether I think it's good or not. Unfortunately, for as unique as this build was and how badly I wanted it to work out, I just thought it fell kinda short. In my opinion, having Energy Bolt as the main filler for this build is a bit too slow, and I really think that is why the build kind of falls short, because the ramp time takes way too long to try to get your full combo points to spend on that big Immolate. Even with the Lightning Overload procs every once in a while, you just have to think about the 2-second cast time, and you have to do that 4 or 5 times to get the full combo points to spend. It just takes too long, and this really affects the single target DPS a lot. Additionally, your talent points are spread pretty thin on this build. You have to throw talent points into the Fire Mage tree to increase our fire damage, and then the Dust Warlock tree to buff up that Immolate. This leaves very little room to throw points into the Elemental Shaman tree to buff up that Energy Bolt, and even then it feels kinda silly to have to spend talent points just to buff up that one ability. And these issues were even more apparent during PvP. Again, it just takes too long to ramp up and finally get that big Immolate combo finisher off. Which is honestly a shame because it was such a unique RE to play around with, and I really wanted it to work. However, I think in its current iteration, it just isn't that good. So it's for these reasons that I think Elemental Destruction deserves a 2 out of 5 marks of Ascension. What would you do different to set up this build? I'd like to hear your discussion in the comments down below. Thanks for watching this video. I hope it either convinced you to give this build a shot or to stay away from it, depending on where you sit on this. Stay tuned to my channel where I'll be discussing more Ascension builds, and I will see you all in the next video.